My name is Amanda Wayne. I served 18 years in the United States Army, most of them spent behind the scenes keeping things running that no one ever noticed until something broke. I joined right out of high school because I wanted purpose, structure, and maybe a little bit of pride. I thought if I worked hard enough, I'd earn respect, maybe even admiration. For the longest time, I believed that was how the system worked. When my retirement ceremony was announced, I imagined it would be the day everything came full circle. I pictured standing there in uniform, my son watching from the front row, hearing my name called with gratitude. I thought I'd feel that weight lift, the kind that builds after years of long nights, missed birthdays, and the quiet exhaustion that comes from being both mother and soldier. But the truth is, the day didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like standing on the edge of something I didn't recognize anymore. I walked into that hall expecting to be honored for my service, to finally hear that my sacrifices had mattered. Instead, I learned that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought overseas. They happen right in front of people who were supposed to have your back. Wearing the uniform never felt easy for me. I wasn't the kind of soldier you saw in recruitment posters. I wasn't out on the front lines or storming into action. I was in logistics, buried in paperwork, schedules, supply runs, and the kind of details that only mattered when someone didn't do them right. And I was the only woman in my unit for most of those years. That meant something different from what it should have. Most days, I felt invisible, not in the dangerous way, not in the camo blending into the brush way, more like I was always present, but never seen. When we unloaded shipments or reviewed inventories, I got handed the clipboards or the coffee runs. My opinions didn't carry weight in meetings. My mistakes got magnified. My wins were absorbed into the group like they had no face. I learned early that no one was going to pat me on the back, so I stopped waiting for it. I stayed late, picked up the grunt tasks no one wanted, and memorized protocols until I could troubleshoot in my sleep. I kept things moving even when the system tried to stall me. There were a few guys who saw it, who started quietly counting on me, but they never said much out loud. I got used to silence. I carried it like part of my gear. I told myself it didn't matter, that they joked around with each other like brothers and barely noticed me. What mattered was that I didn't give them a reason to doubt me. I worked twice as hard just to be considered average. Every promotion I earned came with a side of suspicion, like people wondered who pulled strings for me or what box I checked. There were nights I sat in my bunk, with sore feet and a stiff back, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was wasting my life, proving something no one would ever acknowledge. But then, I'd remember Jack. Back then, he was just a toddler. I'd think about him playing with his little plastic army men, telling people his mom was a soldier. That kept me going. The truth is, I never wanted a medal. I just wanted to be treated like my work mattered, that I mattered. But in the military, respect often came in the shape of male camaraderie or loud praise, and I didn't get either. Still, I stayed. I showed up every single day. I learned how to lead in quiet ways, how to be dependable when it counted. And somewhere along the way, I started believing that maybe when I retired, they'd finally say it out loud, that Amanda Wayne made a difference. The room smelled like polished wood and coffee, with a hint of sweat from too many pressed uniforms in one place. A banner hung crooked above the podium. Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Wayne. The chairs were filled with familiar faces, people I'd served beside for years. Some looked bored. Others were already checking their phones. I kept scanning the crowd for Jack, who sat near the back with his feet barely touching the floor, swinging gently. I had ironed my dress uniform twice that morning. Not because I wanted to impress anyone. I just didn't want anyone to say I showed up looking sloppy. I thought maybe someone would mention the night convoys I coordinated in the middle of sandstorms, or how I stepped up when our lead was pulled mid-deployment. I thought there'd be a real speech, maybe a handshake with meaning. Instead, Sergeant Monroe grabbed the mic and started cracking jokes. Let's all give it up for Amanda. 18 years of making coffee and organizing boxes like a champ. Laughter scattered through the crowd. My smile held, but my chest tightened. He added, seriously though, Nobody could alphabetize faster. We owe her our weekly supply of paper clips. Louder laughter now. I glanced at Jack. He wasn't laughing. He was frowning, eyes flicking between me and the room. Monroe kept going. She kept the rest of us on track, mostly by yelling at us like a second wife. Another burst of chuckles, my hands curled in my lap. The kind of laughter that isn't cruel on the surface, but underneath it slices. I felt heat rise up my neck. Someone shouted from the back, "Still single though, right?" That got a big response. I looked straight ahead, unblinking. I told myself to breathe. Just breathe. This wasn't new. I'd sat through this kind of teasing before. But this time, it was different. This was supposed to be mine. My moment. And instead, I was the punchline. They weren't honoring me. They were entertaining themselves with me. Jack shifted in his chair, leaning forward like he wasn't sure if he should say something. The final straw was when Monroe raised his cup. To Amanda, Queen of Storage Rooms. May your filing cabinets in civilian life be just as exciting. I heard laughter blend with a few claps. I heard a glass clink against another. I didn't hear my name with pride. I didn't hear anyone say thank you for showing up when it counted. I stayed seated, staring straight ahead. My jaw locked. My shoulders stayed square. Inside, I felt something folding in on itself. Not because they didn't praise me. I had lived without praise before, but because Jack was watching people laugh at his mom on the day she was supposed to be celebrated, watching me sit in silence. Again, I looked over at Jack and saw the moment it hit him. His face was scrunched, eyebrows pulled tight, mouth slightly open like he was trying to understand a joke he wasn't in on. He turned to me and whispered, "Mom, are they making fun of you?" That question didn't just hurt, it wrecked me. Jack had always seen me as strong. I was the one who fixed broken things, who got up early and stayed up late, who never missed a school play or a parent-teacher meeting, even after a 12-hour shift. In his eyes, I wore the uniform like armor, not for show, but because I fought for us. I had never let him see me small. Not once. And now here he was, in a room full of people in pressed uniforms and polished shoes, hearing his mother become the center of a joke. He was 12, old enough to know when something's off, but still young enough to believe that adults are supposed to be kind. He looked up at me like I had the answer. I had none. My throat felt dry. I wanted to turn and wrap my arms around him, to tell him it was okay, that they didn't mean it, but I couldn't lie. He'd seen too much already. I just gave him a small nod, trying to hold the edges of myself together. His hand found mine under the table. It was small and warm, and held tighter than usual. That grip said more than words. It said he knew. It said he didn't like it. It said he was waiting to see how I'd respond. And that crushed me. Not the laughter, not the fake toasts, not the careless words from people I'd once trusted. It was this: that my son was learning that even when you give your all, people can still laugh in your face. I thought I could handle anything if it was aimed at me. I'd been doing that for years, but I never wanted him to see it, to feel that sting secondhand. I never wanted him to wonder if being strong made you a target. I sat there frozen, smiling just enough to pass for calm, while inside something heavy settled in my chest. The kind of weight that doesn't move, even when you stand. He didn't say anything else, just kept holding my hand, and I kept holding his. It felt like we were both waiting for someone to step in, to say that enough was enough. No one did. The speeches moved on. The laughter faded. But what stayed was that moment, that look, that question. It's the kind that stays with you, long after the room goes quiet. I started to rise, my hands still gripping Jack's, my legs shaky but determined. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to make a scene. I just needed to get out of that room before the last shred of dignity I had slipped away with the next joke. I pulled my purse close, nodded slightly to Jack, and began to step back from the table. Then I heard the chair scrape. Not mine, someone else's. The sound cut through the laughter like a snapped wire. I froze. So did everyone else. Heads turned. It was Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell. He stood slowly, his face unreadable. He didn't say a word at first, just looked across the room with the kind of stillness that made everyone sit up straighter. The microphone was still in Monroe's hand, but Mitchell took it without asking. Monroe didn't resist. He looked like a kid caught in the wrong joke at the wrong time. The mic made a soft feedback buzz as Mitchell adjusted it. The air in the room shifted, the kind of quiet that isn't calm, but expectant. The kind that comes before thunder. I sat back down without thinking. My pulse thudded in my ears. Jack leaned closer, whispering, "What's happening?" I didn't know. I couldn't answer. My eyes locked on Mitchell's face. He wasn't looking at Monroe. He wasn't looking at the audience. He was looking at me. There was something in his eyes that made me feel bare. Not ashamed. Seen. Really seen. The silence dragged. No one moved. No one dared laugh. The same people who had chuckled a minute ago were now gripping their chairs, watching him like they didn't know if they were about to get reprimanded or reminded of something they forgot. I had worked under Mitchell's command for over a decade. He was firm, by the book, not the kind to show emotion or step outside protocol. I couldn't recall him ever raising his voice or giving more than a polite nod when someone retired. Which is why this moment felt like something was cracking open. He held the mic in one hand, the other resting at his side, and for a moment, I thought he might just hand it back and sit down, but he didn't. He took a slow breath, and when he finally spoke, it was low, steady, and cut through the tension like a blade. Not dramatic, just real. Just enough. People leaned forward in their seats. Even Monroe had gone pale. The jokes were gone. The smirks were gone. The only thing in that room now was waiting, and the weight of one man's silence before a storm. When Mitchell finished speaking, the room stayed silent. Not because no one had anything to say, but because they knew whatever came next had to be real. The kind of silence that feels earned, like people were sitting with their own thoughts for once, not hiding behind laughter or noise. Then someone clapped. It was soft, just one pair of hands at first, then another and another, until the whole room was clapping. Not loud or wild, just steady. The kind of applause that says, "We heard you. We get it now." I didn't move. I just sat there, stunned, unsure how to receive something I had waited so long for. Jack turned toward me and threw his arms around my waist. His head pressed against my side like he was trying to anchor me to the moment. "Mom," he whispered. That was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I wrapped my arm around him, finally letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. A few people came over. Not many, just enough. One woman from the supply nodded at me, like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Another guy from my old team gave me a small salute. It wasn't about the crowd. It wasn't about the ceremony anymore. It was about that shift, that quiet acknowledgement that maybe I wasn't invisible after all. I stood slowly, still holding Jack's hand. My heart felt lighter, like something had been unknotted deep down. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't forcing a smile. It just came. Not for them, for me. For the years I'd held everything in. For the little boy beside me, who finally saw the world recognize his mom the way he always had. It's been 6 months since that day in the hall. Since the banner, the silence, and Mitchell's words changed everything. I didn't expect much to come after. Just peace, maybe. A quieter life. But somehow, my story found its way out. A clip from the ceremony circulated. Then came an email. Then another. Now, I speak at local events, mostly to young women thinking about joining the military. I tell them the truth. That strength doesn't always look like medals or titles. Sometimes it looks like showing up, even when no one claps for you. Jack always comes with me. He sits in the front row and gives me a thumbs up right before I walk on stage. I don't stand up there for praise. I stand for the women like me, who stayed quiet for too long, and every time I see someone in the crowd nod like they understand, I know I'm doing something that matters. I used to think being invisible was just part of the job. Not anymore. My story isn't hidden anymore. And it turns out, telling it helps others find their own voice too. If you've ever sat in a room and felt small when you were supposed to feel proud, I want you to know you're not alone. If someone laughed when you needed support, or turned away when you needed a hand, I see you. I've been there, and I know how hard it is to hold your head up when everything inside is folding in. But you're stronger than they realize. Your story matters, even if no one claps when you tell it. And sometimes, the act of standing up, of simply saying, "That hurt," is more powerful than any speech or ceremony. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission. You already have it. If this story reminded you of a moment in your life, I'd love to hear it. Drop it in the comments. Not because we need sympathy, but because when we speak, we remind others they can too. Your voice has weight. Your dignity is yours to carry, not theirs to take. And the moment you decide to stand tall, that's when everything starts to change.